If you're watching this on YouTube and aren't subscribed, make sure and click the subscribe button, like, comment, let us know what you think about the episode. If there's a particular guest or topic that you'd like to have on the podcast, we're always checking your feedback on there and love to be able to get them onto future episodes. Today, I'm going to be talking with a guest who has a F150. It's an OBS style, and they did a 7.3 swap. I'm really excited to go through the whole build of putting a 7.3 Powerstroke into this truck, any challenges that they came across during the process, and jump, kind of really into the details of this build. So before we get to it, I want to give a shout out to Kershaw Knives. If you're in the market for a new knife for EDC, hunting, fishing, something around the job site, make sure and go to kershaw.kaiusa.com. Use code 40 TDP2024. Get you 40% off MSRP. So it's a great way to save some money, get some cool gear. They've got a bunch of different choices for blade steel, blade shape, different opening mechanisms, and handle designs. So we appreciate them offering that discount code just for Diesel Podcast listeners. All right, let's get to today's podcast with Selena and talking about this F-150 with a 7.3 Powerstroke swap. Selena, welcome to the Diesel Podcast. I'm looking forward to chatting with you today. I love that you have the truck we're going to be talking about behind you because it always helps to kind of visualize, the truck. And I saw a post that Fast Fuel Systems, I don't remember what event they were at, but they had some pictures of you and your truck, and I saw an F-150 badge. And I know it's a diesel, and I'm like, I've got to talk with her, ask about this truck, how it came to be what it was. So welcome to the podcast. Look forward to chatting today.
Thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here.
I can't wait to learn. I can't wait to learn more about this truck. If we go back to the beginning, tell me about this truck, what made it special to you, and then we'll start to go through like the ideas to do a diesel swap and then that whole process. But take me back to the beginning.
Yeah. So if you want to kind of go back to like when you were 14 years old and you're looking for your first vehicle, I have an older brother who had a lifted truck, and I always rode around in trucks when I was younger, so I knew that I wanted a truck for my first vehicle. I wouldn't say that I was particularly looking for a Ford, but at the time I just was attracted to it. I thought it looked good, and we went to go look at it, and it's what I wanted, so we took it home with unknown issues. Being that it was originally an F-150 mud truck, so it was abused. If I would have known that, I don't know, maybe we would have went down on the price a little bit or something, but that doesn't matter because we're here now and I have it and it's important to me. But it had a 302 in it, which was very tired. I don't think that should have been used for a mud truck, but whatever. It was in northern Wisconsin, so I don't know what they do up there, but yeah, and it was an automatic trans. I actually didn't get to drive it, so 14, I had it for a little bit, turned 16, I still wasn't able to drive it because it needed work. It was always at the mechanics, getting work done to it. My dad wanted to make sure that it was safe for me to drive. Obviously it wasn't. And then finally, once it, ran okay and drove okay, the engine needed to be rebuilt. Like it was done. So the engine got rebuilt. And then I drove it for a while. I didn't start the build until like 3-4 years ago. So I did drive it for a little bit in between, just for fun and not necessarily daily driving like I had planned to.
What was there a point where you knew you wanted to go a completely different direction with the truck than keeping it a 302 and keeping it the same setup? What was that defining moment?
So if you're familiar with like gas engines from the 80s, Ford had like a really bad EFI system. Like it just always had problems. And I started to have issues with the fuel system, like where I couldn't drive it reliably anymore. And I didn't really want to stick money into keep fixing it, especially with I had rebuilt it once already and it was leaking oil like so bad again. So I knew it had to be gone through again. And I didn't want to do that again. I didn't want to stick money into what it already was. I felt like I was starting to get into more of like the truck scene, you can say. And I was like, well, I have this truck and I really want to take it to shows, but what do I do with it? Like, I don't want to take it how it is now and it needs work. And my boyfriend is a diesel guy, and he brought up the idea of doing the 7.3 swap. And I didn't really know much about mechanics at that time. I knew some basic knowledge, but he explained the process to me, and it was a fairly simple process to start with. So we decided to go with it.
Was it, what was it like going into the diesel scene or deciding I'm going to take a diesel engine and swap it into my truck? Was it intimidating? Was it exciting to be able to learn something new? Because as diesel enthusiasts, we're always reading and watching things about diesel trucks, but the general public, it's a very small piece of like what people drive. And sometimes it can be intimidating because there's lots of similarities, but it's a vastly different kind of industry. So I'm curious how it was, or if you were really excited to jump in, or what the process was like saying, I'm going to put in this diesel engine.
I was very excited. When I met my boyfriend, he had a Cummins. Obviously, he still does. He's a big Cummins guy, and I love how they sound and the um, capability they have, reliability, and I don't know. I saw the opportunity that he was going to teach me about a lot, and I wanted to take it because if I'm going to go into the truck scene, I want to know what the heck I'm doing. So I was very excited to get the 7.3, and I felt like it was one of the best. I mean, for somebody who's going into it, I would, recommend a 12 valve or a 7.3, something easy to start with that's been around for a long time.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. And the aftermarket support that's there as well.
Yeah.
There's a ton of it. How did you find the engine? Was it something you had to look around for quite a long time? Was it something that you just kind of came across, or how'd you find the engine?
My grandpa he's a big Ford guy. I grew up in a lot of Fords, like I said, and he has like a truck lot of all their old service trucks. And I asked him if he had a 7.3, and he said, yeah. So I went to go look at it, and I took it. I mean, he gave me a good deal on it. That was the engine I needed. So we took it. I didn't really look around much for it. I didn't try to shop around. I had a good deal and it was right there.
Was it in good working order when you got it, or did you guys have to do some work to it?
Well, it was on the lot because they retired it. It was like in an OBS. Or I'm sorry, it wasn't a Super Duty from an '01. He did have an OBS there, but that one was an IDI. I didn't want an IDI. So we took the Super Duty engine. It had 180,000 miles on it. Always was a service truck. They have a tire center. So it did a lot of idling, but he said it was a great truck. It ran good when they had it. They just parked it because they upgraded. So and when we got it, I never even started it to hear it. We just pulled it out right away and put it on a stand and started working on it.
what was the what was the first day like? So you got the engine, you got the truck there. What were the first few days like?
Well, we ripped the cab off of it, and the front clip, wow, I don't even really remember taking all that off of it. I just remember I have pictures of us already. I do remember taking the cab off, but obviously we had the front clip off, and it was just the service body on the frame. And I have pictures on my Instagram from it, but it was a very fast process to rip the engine out because we knew we weren't going to use anything from it. I mean, the service truck was like unusable anymore. It was just out of date, rusty, dirty. Nobody would want that. So we knew we were going to scrap it. So it was like one of those really fast engine removals where you just cut stuff and rip it out and put the engine on a stand and start working on it.
I've had conversations with people over the years where they've talked about doing a Cummins swap or even like a Duramax in an old C10. But I haven't chatted with somebody who's done a diesel swap on an F-150. What's that like? I don't know anything about it. I don't know how much you could reuse, how much you had to just, get like a donor truck or use parts from something else. What was it like putting it into that truck?
When we started the process, we kind of made a list of what we needed to hunt down to make this work. And it was a combination of Super Duty stuff. So from like the '01 primarily, but other Super Duty years would work as well. And then we needed a lot of like brick nose F350 IDI things to make it work too, because obviously my truck's an F150 gas. So I didn't already have those components to use from a brick nose diesel. So I got a 91 parts truck, and then I had my '01 parts truck. And I'd say I got a lot of my stuff from those two. I can go into detail if you want to
Yeah,
know exactly what I got
yeah.
from what. Okay. And I have like a little list here because I forget a lot of stuff. So I needed to make sure I would remember where everything came from correctly. Um, the so the engine came from an '01, and we used the intercooler from that, and we used I didn't even use the trans because that was a two-wheel drive trans, and I should have probably actually stuck with it. It was a ZF6. I should have four-wheel drive swapped it and used it. Now I have a ZF5, which is actually from like a '96 that I just bought on Marketplace. Um, None of the trucks that I had for parts trucks had a manual in it that I wanted, so we just got that on Marketplace, which was from, like I said, a '96. We had to use the engine cradle from the brick nose diesel, so we had to cut that out of the parts truck and put it in this one, bolted in. The chassis I got is actually from, I don't actually know the year. I got that on Marketplace as well. The guy said it was a brick nose chassis. I think it's actually a little bit older, but it is an F350. And that's where we got my front axle as well. I want to say it's like a dent side era, maybe bull nose. Um, and then the rear axle is from the brick nose parts truck that I had from a '91. It's a Sterling 1025. I should probably say what the front axle is because a lot of people assume that it's a Super Duty axle, which is super easy to do for a swap. And I could have easily done that as well. It's just that I already had this axle with the chassis and it was going to work. It's a Dana 60 Kingpin, like I said, from the dent side era. So we built the four link mounts onto it instead of the Super Duty ones that already have the four link mounts on them.
Okay.
What else do I have here? Transfer cases from the brick nose. As far as the wiring goes, we had to take the dash harness, the chassis harness, and the cluster from the brick nose to run with my 7.3. And I got a standalone harness from Ford All Built in California to run the 7.3. And my dash actually doesn't work right now. I have an Edge CTS1 monitor, but we are planning to make it work so that all my factory gauges can work, which I think would be really cool. It's just that we didn't have time to get to it yet. Throttle pedal is also from the '01, and so is the engine mounts. I had to use a combination of the new engine mounts because the blocks are different, which I didn't know that. That was actually kind of an issue that we ran into for a little while. I tried to buy engine mounts for the brick nose, like IDI, and they weren't working on my block. Well, to come to find out after talking to a few people, the blocks are different. So you have to take like the piece that bolts to the block and separate it from the piece that bolts to the chassis or the cradle, and then put those two together, and it works. So if I would have known that to start with, it's really not that complicated. But again, I didn't really know much about 7.3s at that time, so it was something I had to figure out.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of little things like when somebody's thinking about a build like this, or they might have an idea, and if it hasn't, like some of them have been done so many times that there's tons of things you can find on forums or different Facebook groups, different things that are out there. But when it's something that's so different, you're kind of blazing a trail with it and having to learn and then ask people different questions, and they get really curious about like how'd you mount the engine or what'd you do with the axles. Or so I'm glad you went through the details, because there's no way if somebody comments on this I'm going to know what you guys used or what did and didn't work. But those are really good details to know if somebody's thinking about tackling a project like this.
Yeah, the it's a lot of like I said, combining the brick nose with the Super Duty. Like you could probably use a Super Duty radiator, but we used a brick nose radiator, and then we had to cut out some of the mounts on the radiator to make the intercooler work because the IDIs were non-intercooled. So it's just a little bit that you have to figure out and go through to make it fit. I mean, any custom build, you're going to figure that out.
How long from, let's say, the moment you decided I'm going to put a Powerstroke into this truck to when you could just fire it up, like when it was in the truck, how long did that take?
It was a course of like 3.5 years, I want to say. we started to build the F350 chassis without ripping apart my F150. And honestly, that was kind of a nice thing to do because, like I said, we didn't have the F350 to start with. So I could still drive my F150 the way it was until we were ready to do the body swap. I would actually recommend doing it that way to a lot of people who are looking to start a build. Just get a whole nother chassis, like get exactly what you're looking for. And I wasn't necessarily exactly looking for this chassis. I kind of sometimes wish that I would have gotten a different chassis, something newer, and made the body mounts work. But this is what I have. It's what I started with. We were already so deep into it that I just wanted to finish it. So we built the F350 chassis. We actually redid it. Like it wasn't coming out the way I wanted it to. It wasn't tall enough for me. It didn't look very pretty. It's, show truck worthy is what I was thinking. So when we had the chassis kind of like set, ready to put the engine in, I was like, wow, I really don't like how this is coming out. I don't want to go further without redoing what we already did. The chassis had a leaf spring lift on it, a 6-inch one. And that's why the process was going to be so simple, was because I was just going to put the engine in there and put my body on it and drive it. But then I, again, wasn't liking how it was coming out. And I wanted to change it and go for more of a show truck look instead of a daily driver like it was. So when I saw that the leaf springs weren't coming out how I wanted it to be tall enough, and I had my frame powder coated, and it was like, I picked like a textured finish, and I hated it. I didn't like it at all. So I sanded the frame down, and it was supposed to be a rust-free frame, and it wasn't. Like, I mean, again, I didn't really know much about it. So once they sandblasted all the stuff off, I'm like, wow, this looks like shit. So I like did a skim of body filler over it, sanded it down, and then we did a single stage black on the axles and the chassis. So it came out a lot better than how if I would have said, let's just go with it, I'm very happy that we took the time to redo it, because now I have my 4-link suspension coilovers, and I have, a nice shiny paint on the chassis, which is where we did 90% of the work to match the engine bay.
Were there any challenges that you had getting that body onto the chassis where you had to modify the body to make it fit, especially with the engine? Were there any things you ran into there?
Not much, honestly. The downpipe is a 3-inch downpipe, and we just had to cut out a small piece of the firewall and make a new piece that would, kind of mold to where the downpipe sits. It's a very tight fit there, the firewall on this one. And I don't know if it's different because it's not an F350 cab, I guess I don't know that difference if they're the same or not, but we had to cut out a little piece of the firewall to make the downpipe fit. And then there's like 1-inch pucks. I wouldn't call it a body lift. They're just like on a little bit of a body lift, I suppose, but not noticeable to, again, clear that downpipe, because even though we cut out some of it, there was a spot on the firewall where if we were to cut more to fit it, it just would look really goofy. So we just did the 1-inch puck that's not even noticeable. And that's pretty much it. So that part was fairly simple.
And there weren't, as far as fitting that transmission, the ZF5, there weren't any clearance issues or anything that you ran into?
Not at all. No, it went right in. I just had to get, my truck was an automatic. So in Ford, they must have used like the same like trans tunnel pan in there. The automatic one doesn't have a hole for the shifter. The manual does. I just had to go get a manual one that had the hole in it, and went right in.
Perfect. Were there, as far as the vision you had for it, when you were mentioning the truck didn't look the way that you want, did you have a vision from the very start of exactly what you wanted this to look like, with the height, the wheels, the tires, the color, everything?
Not really. Honestly, it kind of just it came together. I thought I had a vision. I thought I wanted just an easy body swap, put the 7.3 on an F350 chassis with a 6-inch leaf spring lift, super easy, right? Just repaint everything, and she's good to go. And then I saw it, and I'm like, this is not what I want. So then I wanted it to be taller. I wanted it to be shiny. I wanted it to be clean and pretty. And that's where we decided to, take the step further to do all of those things. And And I still honestly didn't have a vision of how it was going to look or what I was going for. I just knew that I wanted it taller and shiny and pretty.
Common question we get from you guys a lot is, hey, I need a diesel engine. I either, I can't wait this long to get one, or normal place I get stuff from it just takes too long, or they don't have the parts in it that I need. Maybe my truck's not stock, or I tow heavy with it. I don't want to go back with just a stock engine. DFC Diesel is a sponsor of the podcast. We worked with them, hand in hand on doing episodes, answering technical questions. They have a complete lineup of Cummins, DurMax, and Powerstroke remanufactured engines that are set to a standard of ISO 9001 2015 standards, which is a huge deal in the aftermarket. And there's certain levels of quality testing, validation that are required for that. So when you get one of those engines, the type of quality that's built behind it with an industry-leading warranty that's really comprehensive. And the other thing with that is sometimes the options that are out there, it's a basic OEM engine. You want a little bit more. You don't want to have the same failure again. So there's a bunch of different series of engines that they have, from core, street, tow haul, and also the Speed of Air series, which we've covered on the podcast before. There's a lot of really cool benefits to it. And if you have questions about that, reach out to them. If you don't know the type of engine that you're looking for, if you go to dfcdiesel.com, there's a ton of info there. You can send an email or you can reach out to them. Also, they're working with Speed of Air pistons, which it's the only piston that pays for itself. And there's a lot of really cool technology behind it. So you can add that into your build and be able to get better fuel economy, increase power, increase torque, and better engine life out of it. Some of the most common engine applications or series of engines that they have with that lead time, a lot of them are in stock or they have really short lead times. So you can check your favorite retailer or go to dfcdiesel.com, check them out, see what's in stock, see what you can get. If you have questions, maybe you want to do something that's outside of the normal series of engines, they have tons of choices for rods, cranks, pistons, valve train upgrades, tons of different things. So if you're in the market, definitely make sure and head on over and check them out. Well, it's one of the things though that really stands out about older trucks. Like if I see a brand new one, it's lifted, or maybe it's not brand new, but it's newer, I can see dozens of them driving around where I live. I'll see, it's just like, oh, it's another Ram or another Ford or another, Chevy or something like that. But when I see an older truck, whether it's a Ford OBS, a first gen, anything like that, and the detail is in the painted frame, it's in the suspension, it's in everything, it grabs my attention. It just pulls me in, and then I want to ask questions like I do right now about, the truck, the history, how did it all come together. So I love that type of build, and then the detail that you put into it.
I should probably also note a little bit on the we didn't really talk about how the brake system works. That we had to get Hydro Boost from an '05 actually. That was one of the newer parts that I used. I didn't really know what I was going into with that, so I asked some advice from a few people, and they told me to go with the '05 because it's a little bit better than the Super Duty one, apparently. So we did. We made it work. It doesn't necessarily bolt right in, especially on my cab. Again, it might be different if you use a different cab, but being that mine's an F-150, we made it work. And then we made all new brake lines ourselves. My boyfriend Jacob did that. It looks very nice. I'm very thankful to him for that. And then I just got some extended brake lines. Kind of looking back at it, the steering that we built ourselves as well. You can buy a couple steering kits online, but being that we did all the custom fabrication ourselves already, we wanted to do the steering as well. Steering, I just want to say what kit we used.
Yeah.
It's a GM 1-ton kit, actually, so it's a DIY thing. I believe you can find some DIY things online to make it yourselves if you're interested in doing something like that. But again, you can also buy the kits online.
When you look back at the build now, would there be a couple things that you would have changed how you did it, or that you would recommend for somebody to think about if they're going to plan a build similar to this, to either help them save time or maybe money, or maybe do something a little bit different?
Yeah, it was definitely a lot of shots in the dark here when I started it. We didn't really have a direction of where we were going after I decided to redo everything. I would recommend to get parts trucks with the gear that you need. Do the list of what you exactly need when you start it, like I did. And obviously there were some things that we didn't remember, and just had to get. But I found a lot of advice through um, friends and online, Facebook primarily, or some Instagram through some of the following that I had. Um, I would probably say a couple of challenges that we faced were like, what are we going to do with the fuel tank? Because my truck was gas, and I don't know, you probably could have made the location, the factory location work. However, um, I wanted to change it up. So we went with a fuel cell in the bed, which was a pretty easy process. You could do, I was going to do a Bronco tank in the rear, but it just looked really goofy hanging that far down. Obviously, it's meant for a Bronco, so that was kind of a dumb decision. Don't do that. The fuel cell was a great idea to make it easier. Trying to think of a few other things.
What about budgeting? That's a huge one that I think people run into is how to budget
Mhm.
for a build like this, especially if, like with your build, you might not have known everything that was going to go into it. Would there be tips you'd give to budget for something like this?
Oh, that's a hard one because you don't know what you're going to run into. I mean, if you try to follow my exact process, then yeah, I can probably tell you what I ran into, but I can't tell you that there was not a lot of things that I spent money on and it's not wasted because we changed our minds or um decided to go a different route or it just didn't end up needing it actually. I didn't, I mean, I had a budget in mind for the original build, the easy build. And then once we decided to go with the other way, I didn't have a budget. That was like I didn't know what I was getting into. Kind of had an idea, but it went a lot further than I had thought, which I think goes with every build, honestly. There's still a lot of things that I want to do to it, but I'm happy with where we are right now. And there I will always have it. I will always be able to get to it. So
You had mentioned earlier getting the gauge cluster to work and finishing that up. Are there any other parts on the truck that you want to wrap up to kind of call the build done? And I know that they're not ever
mhm.
really truthfully done, but like as close to done as it could be.
Yeah. The front drive shaft is probably our top priority. We are going to get that in this winter. Not that I'm ever gonna put it in four-wheel drive or I'm ever gonna take it off road or anything, but it's just like people give you so much shit for it, and it's like, yeah, it does look goofy and it looks unfinished, but I'm never gonna take it off road. I'm never gonna use it technically. The transcross member, I mean, with the lift, the transcross member is in the way for us to fit the front drive shaft, so we're just gonna design a new one. You can buy one online too, but being that we did all the custom fabrication ourselves, we'd like to do that as well.
The one of the parts of it that I wanted to ask you about is like with your Instagram and then what I saw on with Fast when they had reposted your truck. I wanted to ask you about being at events and having people stop. They notice the F-150 badge. They start to talk with you. What has it been like interacting with people, enthusiasts that love that body style truck and the diesel aspect to it? What's it like going to different truck events?
I've actually only brought this truck to UCC, which is where we kind of debuted the build. And my boyfriend was drag racing at UCC. So it was like, well, I wouldn't say he wasn't like competing, but we were just having fun.
Yeah.
So I was all over the place. I didn't really get to sit by my truck very much, but for a little bit that I did get to talk to some people. I'd really like to bring it back to UCC to be able to talk with some people more. It was like the best experience I could have ever asked for to debut the truck for the little bit that I did get to experience it at the booth. I am extremely thankful to CNC Fab for bringing me there. They obviously had a couple helping hands in this truck, a few parts that I got from them. So when they asked me to be there, I was like, absolutely, like I'm gonna make it happen no matter what. So the last like 3 months were just huge, like crunch time to get it there. Um, you had asked what it's like to interact with them. Yeah, it's a great experience. I have a lot of questions. People do not realize that I did a F350 chassis. They think that I did stick with the F150 chassis and then just, do the axle swap and the engine swap. But I want to keep the F-150 badges. I'll probably switch them out eventually, but I want to keep them just for nostalgic purposes for now, at least until I find the right badges that I do like. Once I kind of move on from it and people recognize the build and they know what I did, I'll probably switch them over.
I love that aspect to it. I hear it a lot when I'm talking with guests or just even not even on a podcast, just talking with people who are into trucks and diesels, is how we get attached to a particular model or year, or sometimes it's just a truck and it doesn't have anything to do with brand loyalty or what the favorite engine is. And I find that there's so many cool stories that come from it because it's something it's custom. There isn't another one out there like it. And I think that's what pulls me into truck builds, and that's why I was really curious about like being an event like UCC where there's people going for everything, racing, competition, check out the companies that are there on vendor row. Maybe they just stop in, want to see what it's about, and somebody can see that truck and it takes them back to a truck their dad had or their grandfather or what their first vehicle was. And they just don't want to keep it like all the other ones on the road. They want to do something custom. And that's what I love about the diesel industry is so many people just say, I want this diesel engine, whether it's a 7.3 Powerstroke, whether it's a Cummins swap, whatever it is, this is what I want to do. And they just do it. They don't wait for it to be made or, say, I wish I had that. They just go out and do it.
Yeah, the possibilities are endless. I mean, if you set your mind to it, you can do it. And I'm not going to say that I could do it alone because I probably couldn't. I mean, I would still be doing it if I was doing it alone. And I definitely wouldn't have been able to do the 4-link build like we did. That was all in my boyfriend's brain. So we had a lot of help from family and friends. We actually didn't really have a lot of Powerstroke guys on board with this besides like social media friends in our area. I'm not going to say that the 7.3 is very popular for building. It's used as a workhorse and driving. We have a lot of like DMAX and Cummins people in this area, so we had a lot of input from that. But I mean, if you know your way around that kind of stuff, you can interchange that knowledge. Like, hey, this is how it works on a DMAX. I would assume that it's similar, or the same kind of concept. This is what it needs to work, and we'll see how it works on this one. And we figured it all out, honestly. So.
And then with social media, how you can just erase the distance and you can connect with people, like you mentioned, CNC Fab. Like I chatted with him maybe a year or two ago, and we were talking about P-pumped 7.3s
Yeah.
and stuff like that, which if I looked around where I live, I wouldn't find anyone that knows how to do that. But through social media and just seeing it, you can connect, and then you can find so much information that's out there that'll help with a build like this.
Mm-hmm. We had a good friend of ours who helped us kind of gather what we needed. He's very familiar with Powerstrokes, but he didn't really have hands-on in the build because he was just too busy. So he just helped us like with his knowledge of what we needed to make it work. Or if we ran into issues, well, this is what you're going to need, or go try this. And like I said, I pretty much found everything on CNC Fab, XDP, I think Diesel Power Products, and CP Addict. What are a couple other good ones that Riff Raff. I did a lot of my just like because they carry Motorcraft, so you can get a lot of your like original engine stuff from there. When we went through the engine, I got a lot of my stuff from them to just refresh everything.
I wanted to ask you about the engine. Did you leave it stock or did you do some upgrades to it, or do you have some power upgrades planned in the future?
I was just going to leave it stock due to budget things. I mean, if you have a Cummins, it's pretty easy to get horsepower out of them, but a 7.3, you need some deep pockets for that one. And I don't know that I'm necessarily looking for horsepower out of it, being that it's lifted and it's old and I have a lot of attachment to it. I don't really feel like competing with it. I do have like I said, we refreshed everything. It was like old and oily and dirty and like, it was a service truck. So I wanted to make it pretty and make it reliable. So when we started it, we kind of took apart what was leaking, resealed it, got new stuff that's known to fail. And then I got like a CNC Fab 4-line fuel kit. We did a whole new like fuel system. It's upgraded a little bit, but nothing like super competitive. And then I happened to get a stage 2 KC turbo on Marketplace with a package deal on a fast fuel system. So it was again something that I just kind of fell into. Like I wasn't looking to upgrade anything, but it's just it was what happened, and I'm happy with it. I also haven't upgraded IDM because like 2 months ago, my IDM failed, and I guess they're known for that. I didn't know that. So I was recommended to get the upgraded IDM since I'm already needing one. And that actually made a huge difference. Like before, it wasn't necessarily slow. It got up to speed okay, but with the upgraded IDM, I noticed the difference.
There's just so many directions like a build like this can go, and I think with the performance side, it can almost. I don't want to say it's bad because it's like we all want more power and more torque, but there's a lot that comes with it when it comes to the clutch, the transmission, the wear and tear on the engine itself, what's going to break, and it can almost snowball into becoming really expensive, like we talked about budget. And I think that that's something that's really key as well. So you knew what you wanted to build, and you went through the process and made some changes, but you knew exactly the end use you would have for it. Something you could drive, something you could take to shows and events, but not going down the performance route, which there's a ton of parts for them now, a ton of different things, but it can get quite expensive for it. And I think that might be a part as well if someone's thinking about a build like this. Like, what is a power number that you're happy with, and do you need 550 horsepower? Do you need 600?
Right.
Do you want to go into that kind of world?
Yeah. I mean, I know that 7.3s are known to be slow, and I was okay with that. Like I said, I'm not planning to go fast or compete with it, but we wanted it to be friendly to drive, not that you're like getting on the highway and you're like, come on, let's go. So that's why we did a few little upgrades, and it was very friendly, and it is very friendly to drive. The little bit that I did drive it, I took it to UCC, and I really didn't drive it much at UCC besides on and off the trailer. But my input shaft seal is leaking, so like really bad. So we have to fix that. Obviously, I can't really drive it a lot like that, but I took it to a few local shows, and the furthest one was like 20 miles one way, which is a lot for this truck because it just since we got it finished, I don't drive it because of the input shaft seal. So when I took it, I was like, wow, this is like really friendly to drive. So I can't wait till we fix that so I can drive it more.
Yeah, that'll be fun. I wanted to ask you about one other part of the truck. Did you have to do much body work with it, or was the body in pretty good shape?
Um, if I mean, it looks good in pictures, but if you see it in person, so when I was like 16, I had the box sides redone because, again, being from northern Wisconsin, I'd had some rust, so I had that fixed. I also had some other rust repair on the truck went done at that same time, but the fenders and the hood and the cab are pretty much, and the doors are pretty much factory yet, and you can tell, it's from the 80s. It's old. It was a mud truck, so the paint is not in the greatest condition. And I don't know that I necessarily want to fully restore the body. I think I'm gonna go with like the patina look for quite a while because I like keeping the nostalgia with the original body on the truck, especially being that the cool part is the chassis and the suspension and the engine bay. Like I want that to be the main focus. While it's very cool to have all that shiny paint and everything, I don't think I'm ready for that.
That's where the build might not ever truly be done, because one day you might decide, hey, I want to do full body restoration, or maybe just leave it like it is. It's such a classic body
Right,
style of
classic.
truck. Yeah, it has that classic feel. We've all seen that body style Ford, and we all have some memory of it in some capacity. It just brings back, I don't even know the right words to use, but it just brings back this feeling when I get it a lot when I see second gen Rams, because I remember when they first came out and I was a kid,
I love
and
them too.
it looks so different than Ford and GM, and it always just stuck with me. It takes me back to being like 13 or 14 years old and seeing those trucks new and the commercials for them. And I know it's like that with each particular brand, and that's one of my favorite parts of conversations like this is just learning and understanding, and then my appreciation for them grows. Like I've never owned a Ford Powerstroke. I've never had that body style truck, but I'm pulled into it because of your enthusiasm for it and the
Hmm.
story behind it and then how you built it. This wasn't like you take it to a shop, hand them $80,000 and pick it up in 6 to 12 months and it's all done. Like you were
Yeah,
hands on with it.
that would have been really nice to do, but again, I mean, I am so happy with everything that I learned with this that when somebody wants to ask me questions, I know exactly what they're talking about. I know exactly what to tell them because I was right there alongside with everybody else. I mean, I didn't build it myself. I had a lot of help, but I was alongside them, and every time I had a question, I asked so that way I would understand. And it's so much to learn. I mean, I had no idea what I was going to learn, and I
Yeah.
can't believe I retained a lot of it either.
There's so much that goes into just one particular truck with just like engines. You can talk for and never even learn everything that there is to learn about engines or turbos or injectors. But then when you have this whole truck, it's just a never ending process of learning, something new with them. I did want to ask you a question, kind of fun, is if you were to look into the future, would you ever do another build like this or would you pick a different truck? Are there any other type of platforms that you may be drawn to or you think I'd like to do this again, but I want to do it with a first gen Cummins or I want to do it with a old square body Chevy or something like that?
It's funny you say that because, um, and if anybody is watching this that has followed me for since the beginning, pretty much, they'll know that my boyfriend has a 91 crew cab long bed square body with a 12 valve in it. And we were going to do pretty much this exact same kind of thing on his truck. Um, and he kind of ran into the same thing where we did it, we got so far, and he wasn't really liking how it turned out. And then other things came up, life came up, other priorities, and it kind of got pushed to the side. And it is pushed to the side right now. It's in pieces in our backyard, waiting to be put back together. So we will do this again. And I'm excited that it's not going to be out of my pocketbook this time. And I can actually just do the building with him. And I don't have to stress about how to pay for it. Because
Yes.
I mean, talk about stress. Like, if anybody asked me, oh, were you stressed out about, was the engine going to run? Or were you stressed out about this or that? That your paint's not perfect. No, I was stressed about, am I going to be able to afford to finish this thing? But we're very excited to do his truck, and that one's going to be a little bit more, um, I would say, show quality. He wants to do, like a full paint job on it, and I don't know if he's going to stick with the Cummins or not. He might do something else with the drivetrain, but we know that we're going to do the same kind of thing. He'll probably have a cradle actually instead of just the front four link, but we weren't really going for that look with this truck, so I'm very excited to go with the further builds as far as it goes for me. Um, I don't know that I would build something like this again. I mean, what more can I ask for on this one? This is pretty much my dream right here, and I know that might sound silly to some people who own those, huge trucks that go to SEMA and everything, and that's great. I mean, I love those, and that's great for somebody like that. But this is what I wanted, and this is what I have. I think the next thing I'll probably do is get like I really like the bump side era Fords, and I really just want one to drive, like with a very stick with the simple lift and simple stuff and just drive it and make sure it's in good condition this time. Kind of like a redo of what my first truck was supposed to be, the F-150.
That'll be very cool. And I think this truck and what you mentioned with the square body Chevy and what you might do in the future is really awesome, and people are going to want to follow it. I know a lot of people follow you already. For them, for people to see this truck, maybe ask you questions, just follow along with what you're doing. What's the best way to connect with you on social media and see the truck and reach out?
Mm-hmm. Instagram is where I started, and that's just my name, Selena Simon. And then I started a TikTok, I don't know what, 2 years ago. I don't post on there as often. That one's kind of more for fun, but I do post on there. I'd like to start a YouTube eventually, not only with this build because I've been asked a lot to go over the entire process like I did with you, but and that would be also our continued builds like the square body and my boyfriend's second gen that he's building more for like diesel performance to compete with that kind of stuff like that. So maybe you can watch for our YouTube in the future if I ever get around to actually doing it. And that's all I have. Facebook is just personal. Maybe I'll start a page on there if it gains popularity, but
Very cool. I appreciate you being willing to come onto the podcast, share the build with me, talk about the whole process from kind of start to finish, and give us an overview of it. I look forward to seeing things you do with that truck, maybe things you do in the future. So it's great to chat with you, and yeah, reach out to me if you do an update on the truck or you do a new build or something like that. I'd love to learn along the way.
well, thank you so much for having me, and I hope we can chat again in the future.
Don't forget, diesel fans, make sure and head on over to kershaw.kaiusa.com. Use code 40 TDP 2024. Gets you 40% off MSRP. It's a great way to save some money, get some cool gear if you're in the market for a new EDC knife or something for hunting, fishing, around the job site, around the house. They've definitely got you covered with a bunch of different choices for blade steel, blade shape, different opening mechanisms, and their whole lineup is designed to meet any budget. So we appreciate them offering that discount code just for you guys. Also want to give a shout out to some of our Patreon supporters, Tyler Loewen of 23 Diesel, CUTTERUP Rob, J Cole, all of our other Patreon supporters, all of you who subscribe on YouTube podcast apps, follow us on social media. We appreciate all your support here in year 8 of the Diesel Podcast and look forward to bringing you more of the content that you want to hear in 2024. Until next time, keep the shiny side up.